Hey everybody, welcome to the Conscious Love Show. Whether you are single, you are in a relationship, or you're healing a broken heart, this show is here to inspire you, to remind you how beautiful, lovable, and amazing you truly are, and to give you the practical tools and insights to navigate from wherever you are right now to the loving relationship that you so deeply want to have. My name is Shane Kohler. I'm a certified transformational coach and trainer with over a decade experience helping people release their trauma and open their hearts to love. I've delivered seminars all over the world, coached thousands of people through my online platforms and programs, and every week I'm coming straight to you with the hottest insights and the best teachers around, bringing you powerful resources and profound conversations to heal your relationship with love, dating, and yourself. I'm so grateful you're here, and if it's your first time, welcome. You can count on me to always show up for you with my very best and a commitment to learn and grow myself so I can serve you to my maximum ability. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got some awesome things planned for you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. All right. Hello again, everybody. Hello. Welcome back to the Conscious Love Show podcast. Shane Kohler on. Pleasure as always. Looking forward to diving back in with you today. I've got a topic lined up for today's episode that I know so many of you are going to resonate with. And today we're talking about how to heal the subconscious attraction to avoidant men. So if you've ever felt yourself caught up in the anxious avoidant dance, which I know probably everybody has at one point or another, if you've ever found yourself caught up in this, then this one is for you. And I want to touch on some important points today, things that I think a lot of people don't really address. But I want to talk about the underlying causes, like why is it that so many are attracted to avoidance in men? What's that all about? Where does that come from? Why does that seem to be the most attractive thing out there? How come when somebody seems to be dismissive or distant or emotionally unavailable, it awakens this need to earn their approval, to show them how wonderful we are and to get them to like us? But when somebody is readily available and interested in making the effort and is consistent, those people tend to feel a little boring, or there's not that spark of attraction there. So I want to talk about why that happens today. But I want to also go a little bit deeper than that, because what I really want to talk about is how we heal that, and also how the attraction to that actually rewards it and perpetuates it in other people. And so something I want to say just starting out before we get too far into this topic is that what we tend to think of as avoidant men are not necessarily avoidant men. Now, let me say there are a certain group of men out there that just have very strong avoidant tendencies, and they are probably going to behave that way and show up that way no matter what you do, right? So I don't want this to sound like if you follow what I'm saying in this podcast, you're going to be able to change every single avoidant man in the world, because that's not what I'm getting at here. But I do want to say this, is that relationships, there are two sides to every relationship, right? Relationships are a two-way street. And how someone shows up for us is often a reflection of how we're showing up for them. Now, that's not always 100% of the time across the board. Again, there are some men out there who are just very strongly avoidant, and they're going to be very strongly avoidant no matter how you show up with them. But there are certain men out there who may have relatively pronounced avoidant tendencies. And when met with a certain kind of woman, when a woman relates with him in a certain way, it will actually soften those avoidant tendencies. And so that's what I want to dive into today is how you as a woman can show up with a man who seems avoidant in a way that actually magnetizes him towards you, in a way that actually draws him into the relationship. Because what I'm getting at here, and I want to be clear, I'm not saying that you should go out and chase avoidant men and try to prove yourself and pursue them. And like, I'm actually talking about the opposite of that. And I'll get into all of that today. But let me just start by saying this. is that women are typically conditioned to be more anxious in relationships. When we talk about these conversations, we often talk about it as though men are avoidant and women are anxious. And there's a reason we talk about it in that way. It's not because every single man is avoidant. It's not because every single woman is anxious. But the reason for that is that the way that we are each socially conditioned is that more women are socially conditioned towards anxiousness and more men are socially conditioned towards avoidance. Women are conditioned to find value through relationship. Men are conditioned to find value through independence. And so there's this unconscious dynamic that's kind of in the water that we're all swimming in, where a woman feels like her value is tied to her ability to get into a relationship. And a man often feels like his value is diminished when he gets into a relationship. And there are lots of reasons for that, and I might address some of them today, but I just want to start by naming that that's kind of the water that we're all swimming in, right? There's this social conditioning that happens where men are socialized to be strong, to be independent, to not need connection or to not want connection, and that's what makes a strong, powerful man. And women are conditioned to be relational, to be connected, to want connection, and largely that her value is dependent on her being in relationship. Now, I want to say on both sides, that's not true. A woman can be incredibly valuable without being in a relationship. A man can be incredibly valuable and be in a relationship, right? Like, I'm married. I've been married for a long time. Like, I don't think my value is diminished because I'm in a relationship. Still, I can acknowledge the certain conditioning that's out there that I was raised in and that many men are raised in that have led us to believe that. And I can acknowledge the opposite conditioning that women receive. And I say all this to say that there's a certain water that we're swimming in here where women are pushing for what they have been taught to want, which is to bond with a man. And that rubs up against what men have been taught to want, which is independence, the ability to play the field, the ability to be strong and stable on his own and to not need love and connection in the same way. And what's really interesting, and maybe I'll start with this is why avoidant men are so often the most attractive men. One of the reasons, and I'll talk about some of the other reasons today, but one of the reasons that avoidant men are often seem to be the most attractive men is because they are living into the archetype of what we have all been trained to think of or see as a real man. Strong, stoic, independent, not needy, not overly emotional. And sometimes the men that are emotionally available, the men that obviously want relationship, they're not necessarily living into the archetype of what we've all been taught to believe is a strong, powerful man. And a lot of these are lies and poor training. So I'm not saying this is the truth. I'm just naming the general, again, the water that we're swimming in, or the social context that we're all living in here. And a lot of healing actually has to do with breaking these conditions, because a lot of women say, I wish I wanted that emotionally available man, the man who calls me and texts me and is consistent and shows up for me, but I'm just not attracted to him. And that's her social conditioning. She's been conditioned to want relationship, but to want it from the alpha male, to want it from the guy who doesn't need it. And in an interesting way, that makes him more valuable, right? If he doesn't need it, but he chooses her anyway, well, now she's really, really special. But if he needs it and he chooses her, now it's almost like, well, I'm not that special because he just needed it anyway, right? And maybe something I could do to break this myth is to start by saying that we all need it. All men, all humans. We all need love and connection. It's fundamental to who we are. And I think the kind of strong, stoic alpha male archetype that so many of us men have been taught to be is actually a deep wounding. Because what's happened for the men who live in that archetype is they still have the same need. They want to be loved. They want to be connected. They want to matter to someone. They want to have a place where they belong. Like that's fundamental to everybody. But what's happened is the feelings that they experience when they allow themselves to connect on that level makes them vulnerable. It makes them feel weak. And in many ways, it is a weakness, right? Like, how many men have fallen in love with a woman and gotten walked all over, or been cheated on, or become, I hate this word, but I'll just say it because it's the word that's used commonly, become some kind of simp, right? And that's maybe the ultimate thing that a man doesn't want to be, is some simp who is beholden to the power that a woman has over him, essentially loses his masculinity to a woman. And that's like the ultimate thing that men don't want to be. And so there's this really wounded context that we're all living in when it comes to dating and relationship, where women often want the unavailable man, and men want connection, but they want it in a way that they don't have to be vulnerable. And just maybe one of the most obvious examples of this is the man who uses women for sexual conquest. And so what he's doing is he's out there and, collecting the proverbial notches on his belt. And what he's doing is he is getting relationship. So he's getting that need met, but he's getting it met in a very shallow way that inflates his ego. So if women want him in that way, if he has strong sexual prowess, now he's able to inflate his ego with his conquest and with being sexually desired by women without ever being vulnerable. And that's like the ultimate archetype of the alpha male. What this does to a lot of women when they experience a man like this is they say, oh, well, he's highly desired by a lot of women. He has his choice of whatever women he wants. Women are basically throwing themselves at him. And if I could get him to choose me, then I would be a woman of equal value. And I know, like, some of you might be cringing while I'm saying this, and I know I'm using very stereotypical kind of patterns here that I'm naming. But I'm naming these patterns, and I know these patterns don't apply to everybody across the board, but the reason that I'm naming these patterns is because these patterns shape the whole social context that we live in. And even if they don't apply 100% to every individual, they still shape our concept of relationship. They still shape our concept of dating. And every single one of us, especially without doing deep healing work or really feeling whole within ourselves, we are influenced by these social patterns. I've said this many times, but we see these patterns in music and in movies and in television and like in all of our stories that are being told to us socially. These are the patterns that are being expressed. I mean, you don't have to take my word for it. Turn on any random TV show that has anything to do with relationship and watch how these patterns are played out on TV, right? Listen to any song on the radio, any mainstream song, and you'll see people singing and talking about these kinds of patterns. This is the social context that we live in. And even if it doesn't apply to every individual is influenced by it. And so let's talk a little bit about where this comes from and how we are shaped from a young age to relate in this way. I've already mentioned that there are certain archetypes of what a valuable man and a valuable woman is in our culture. The valuable woman is the one who gets chosen by the valuable man. The valuable woman is the one who here's the man who could have had his pick of any woman in the world and he chose her. And I want to say that's not the only archetype of a valuable woman. But in terms of our kind of heteronormative standard relationships, that is maybe the biggest, right? So like the feminist movement, there's a new type of valuable woman, like the boss babe who doesn't need a man and has her own business and her own money. And that's awesome too, right? I'm not knocking that at all, but that's kind of anti-relationship almost, right? Like that woman she's almost exited the relationship game. And in terms of how it shows up interrelationally, the woman who is chosen by the high value man, that's often how she is socially conditioned to find her value as well. And the man is socially conditioned to find his value by having his pick of women, right? So his value is when all the women want him and he gets to take his pick. Her value is when the man who could have any woman chooses her. That's kind of our standard blueprint for socially valuable men and women. Now, this all stems from deep childhood wounding. Because if we look at how young boys and young girls are conditioned, this is where it starts and then ultimately what it evolves into. So let's look at this. Young girls are conditioned to be pleasing, acceptable, relationally amiable, nurturing, right? I've probably used this example 100 times on the podcast, but I just think it's one that really illuminates things. It's like girls are given Barbies to play with and boys are given guns to play with, right? Like I always think about, being a young boy and I was taught to play war. We played cops and robbers and army guns and, things like that. And girls were given Barbies and they were taught to play relationships. And so from a young age, girls are conditioned to be relational. They're conditioned to play, dressing up in white and walking down the aisle and being married to the perfect man. And like this, these are the dreams that young girls are sold. And young boys are conditioned to be strong and to fight and maybe it's worth saying that it's not all bad. There's something to be said for a woman being deeply relational and her embodying the archetype of mother and goddess and love and warmth and receptivity. I mean, that's inherently the essence of feminine energy. And when a woman embodies that in a strong way, it's very beautiful. And there's not inherently something wrong with boys being taught to be strong and to fight. Like the masculine in its highest form is a protector and a provider. And so there's something inherent in the masculine energy that wants to be that alpha, that wants to be strong, that wants to fight, that wants to be able to protect his tribe. So there's something fundamental in the masculine and the feminine energy that is shaping us toward this. And that's not bad. That can be very beautiful. But then it gets distorted in our culture. And so it's not the energy itself or the archetype itself that is bad, but it's the way that our culture distorts that energy. And so it's when there becomes a narrow version of what a man and a woman is supposed to be. And we each are kind of forced into that role and compared to the others around us and trying to work our way up the ladder to be at the top of that ladder. And it becomes very competitive. And the truth is there's a certain amount of women that rise to the top, a certain amount of men that rise to the top, and then the rest of us out there just feel somewhat left behind. I've often used the example, I think you see this in high school, where it's like, there's a prom king and a prom queen, or a homecoming king and a homecoming queen. And it's like, there can only be one of each. Right. And so there's this inherent competition to be the perfect archetype, or to live into the perfect archetype of what the queen is supposed to be and what the king is supposed to be. And only two of the students in the whole school can be that. And everyone else is inherently subpar in comparison to them. And so, like, these are these social games that we play that have been set up for us before we were even born, that are already in motion. And it's set up to condition us in this way. And in our adult lives, we're all trying to be the adult version of the homecoming king and queen. And maybe I shouldn't say all of us, because many of us have rebelled against that. And I think it's beautiful, the women who say, like, I'm not going to be the kind of woman that's sitting around waiting for a man to choose me. I'm going to go out and make my own way and make my own life. And I'm going to be the kind of woman that only a high value man can, like, attain. I mean, I think that's beautiful, right? And that's, if you know my work, that's very much what I'm about. But I'm expressing the conditions under which we're all brought up, and the way that this is shaped in all of us. And so when we're young, we're conditioned with these certain impressions. And young girls often have a father who is somewhat emotionally unavailable. And our father and our mother are kind of the blueprint for what we end up believing a man and a woman should be. And a lot of girls from a very young age get their nervous system trained to constantly be seeking the approval of their father, who was often this stoic kind of man, or maybe he wasn't even around. And so there's this inherent thing that gets wired into her system that says, my dad doesn't want me. Or if he was around, there's this thing that gets wired into her system where she's always like, what can I do to get my daddy to look at me, to smile at me, to love me, to give me attention, to make me feel important, to make me feel like I matter? And so from a very young age, she gets trained in this way of vying for approval, vying for acceptance, trying to be good enough. And this is what her nervous system learns in relationship to the masculine. And young boys are often trained in the opposite conditioning. They're taught to toughen up. And a young boy might be looking to his mother for approval in a similar way. And his mother wants him to be this strong, masculine young man. And he's taught to toughen up and to not cry and to be all of those things that the masculine is supposed to be. My father wasn't around when I was young, and I just had my mother. And I remember at a very young age, at 5 years old, people were telling me, you're the man of the house, right? And so here I am, 5 years old, being the man of the house. And that was a burden that I took on at a very young age. And that shaped how I felt about myself and my identity. And in some ways, at 5 years old, I was expected to be the provider for my mother, which was impossible. But it didn't stop me from trying. And so here I am, a child who should have been protected and provided for, but I was told I needed to be that protector and provider. And of course, I couldn't go get a job and I couldn't do those things. But emotionally, that's how it felt. That's kind of the pressure that was put on me. And so I hope I'm painting the picture here of where this conditioning comes from. And when we're talking about the unconscious attraction to avoidant men, what's happening to young girls in this scenario is their nervous systems are being wired to seek approval. And when she spends her whole childhood, whether her father was there or not, it's maybe even more pronounced if her father wasn't around, or if he was working all the time, or like it's maybe even more pronounced then. Because she inherently internalizes the feeling that my father didn't want me, and how that translates archetypally into her life is the masculine doesn't want me. And if you listen to my previous podcast on the spiritual nature of attachment, I think this goes even deeper beyond how we're conditioned as children. But there's something fundamentally like, if I'm a masculine identifying individual, or if someone else is a feminine identifying individual, our relationship with the opposite, so the masculine's relationship with the feminine and the feminine's relationship with the masculine, there's a merging that we're seeking to experience there to almost fill a God-shaped hole inside of us, if you could think about it like that. It's like, if I'm a masculine identifying individual, I'm living on one side of the polarity spectrum. And it's the merging with the other side of that polarity spectrum that brings me back to an experience of wholeness. And so inherently, men are seeking to, on some level, fill themselves with the women in their lives, and vice versa. Women are on some level seeking to fill themselves with the men in their lives. And yes, there are ways that this applies if you're in a gay or non-heteronormative situation, and masculine and feminine energy exist in all people. So, but I want to try to stay on track here without getting into every little nuance of it. But I just want to say, if you're in a different kind of situation, there are ways in which these archetypes apply to you as well. And so a young woman who is living on the feminine side of the polarity spectrum is seeking to merge with the masculine in a way that gives her a feeling of completeness, that gives her a feeling of wholeness. And her father is the first masculine pattern that she experiences. And because men in our world are taught to be stoic and emotionally unavailable and all the things that the wounded masculine tends to be, that's often what she got from her father. That's often what she internalized from her father. And then that shapes how she relates to the masculine in her life. And so I know I've said a lot on this, but I just want to make it really, really simple here. If her patterning with the masculine from a young age, because again, there's this inherent need to merge with the opposite side of the polarity spectrum to create a sense of completeness. If her inherent pattern that she learned in relationship with the masculine was to strive to earn acceptance, approval, and belonging in relationship with the masculine, then that becomes her blueprint. That becomes the way in which she learns to relate to the masculine. And it's not really about her father. It's about how her nervous system internalized relationship with the masculine, and her father was the first place where she got to learn that. And that's true whether he was there or whether he wasn't. And so what the feminine internalizes as a result of this patterning is that she goes into middle school and high school and her adult life, and when she starts engaging romantically, she's taking this fundamental blueprint that her nervous system learned from a very young age, and she's bringing that into her love life. And so what it plays out to, practically speaking, is that a valuable masculine partner is a partner that his love and devotion does not come easily. The pattern is that I have to strive and push and earn my way into his love, and that if I strive to be good enough, I will be chosen. I did an episode on this a few weeks back talking about the core feminine wound is the need to be chosen. And that's what I'm addressing here. That this is where all of that comes from. And this is the thing. It's not just I need to be chosen, because if I needed to be chosen, well, anybody could choose me and that would be good enough. It's not just that I need to be chosen. It's that I need to be chosen by the best. I need the proverbial prom king to choose me. Now I know the prom king doesn't exist out of high school, but that archetype gets translated onto the men in the world. And what is that archetype? The man that every woman wants. Forgive me for being cliche here, but this is the Ryan Gosling or the Brad Pitt or whoever it is, right? Whoever is the new guy this week or this year. But there's that certain archetype that man who is living into the perfect ideal of what we socially expect a man to be, and that is the one that she needs to be chosen by. And it doesn't mean he has to look like Ryan Gosling or Brad Pitt. But there's a frequency, an energy that he embodies. Now, here's the catch. Those men who embody that energy are wanted by all the women. And I'm not speculating here. There's hard evidence-based facts that prove what I'm talking about. So we have access to the dating app data, and you can see clearly that 10% of the men on dating apps get 90% of the attention from women. 10% of the men on dating apps get 90% of the attention from women. I was listening to a podcast and they were going over some of these statistics. And basically they were saying that if you're not one of those men that are in the top 10%, and these are the Ryan Goslings and the Brad Pitts and the men who live into that archetype of what most women think they want. If you're a man who maybe you're less than 6 feet tall, maybe you don't have that specific look or that specific swagger or, whatever it is. If you're in the other 90%, there was a statistic that I read. And basically they were saying that if you're a man who is in the other 90%, you have to swipe 100 times on a dating app to get one match with a woman. And then they were saying, for every one match you get, only 1 in 10 of those matches is going to actually be willing to meet you for a cup of coffee. So that means that if you're the other 90% of men, you have to swipe 1,000 times to get 1 cup of coffee with a woman. Meanwhile, this top 10% of men, the top 10% of most desirable men, basically have their pick of every woman on the app, almost every woman on the app. And I've coached men like this. Like I've coached men who have come to me in their mid 40s and they've been living in that archetype for their whole life. And they're like, I'm fucking bored with my life. I'm depressed. I'm miserable because I get on a dating app. I have a woman come over the same day. We sit by my swimming pool. We hook up. I send her home. And this is just like mind-numbingly dull for me at this point, and I don't know what else to do. And I want to do this delicately, but I want to hold some women accountable. I'm not saying that it's the woman's fault that men are like this. But women who enable this in men perpetuate this behavior. And what I see, because I coach so many women, and what I see so often is women come to me and men are assholes and men are jerks and men are this and men are that, and they hook up and then they never call me again, or we go on a few dates and then they ghost me. And why are all men like this? And I want to say it's not all men who are like this. But when a man has been given unlimited access to women of his choice for as long as he's been dating, that inherently diminishes the value of relationship with women. And I want all the ladies to hear this. This is very, very important. I'm not saying this is right. But think about anything of value, right? Like let's use money, or no, here, let's use travel as an example. And travel costs money. I coached a guy who, he was a multi-millionaire, made all his money by the time he was 23 years old. He got into tech at a young age. He grew some big tech business, ended up selling the business for millions and millions of dollars. And now I met him and he was like 30. And he'd been a multi-millionaire for the last 7 or 8 years. He had traveled the world. He had done everything that a person could do. And he was depressed and bored out of his mind. Now, he was living the dream that most people want to live, right? Unlimited money, do whatever I want. I'm set for life. I can travel. I could do anything, right? Like he was set for life. He could do anything he wanted to do, and he was depressed and bored. Why? Because he was given too much of a valuable thing to the point where it became not valuable anymore. Well, realistically speaking, that top 10% of men on dating apps, the men who can get on a dating app, get a date that same night, hook up with the woman, never call her again if he wants to, the same thing has happened for him. He has become so accustomed to feminine attention that it doesn't mean anything to him. It's not valuable. And 90% of women are competing for this 10% of men, and then they're saying all men are jerks and all men are assholes. No, those men are jerks and those men are assholes. And the reason they're jerks and assholes is because they have been conditioned to not value relationship with women. Meanwhile, there's 90% of men out there who are just dying to get a good quality date. And yes, we could say some of them are low value partners. I'm not going to deny that. Some of them are low value partners. Some of them are men you don't want to date, but a lot of them are humble, hardworking, consistent men who maybe just wants a wife and a family. And so I hope I'm painting this picture clearly, because what we have is a certain social conditioning that has led to this situation that we're in now. And here's what needs to happen. This is how we heal. Women need to train themselves to evolve their attractions beyond the typical alpha male archetype. Whatever it is that has those top 10% of men on dating apps getting all the attention, women need to train themselves to not be attracted to that. And I know, ladies, I get it. That's a big ask, right? Some of you are going to hear that and say, so you want me to not be attracted to the most attractive men? And I'm going to say, well, kind of, but rather, let's think about it like refining our standard for attraction. And understanding that 90% of women are driven by a wound. The need to be chosen by that ultimate man, that's not consciousness, that's a wounding. And that wound is correlating directly with the same wound that top 10% of men have. The wound that doesn't value relationship with the feminine. Can you see how coherent these two things are? How coherent the need to be chosen is when you seek with a man who will never choose you, right? So the need to be chosen is perfectly coherent with someone who will not choose you. And so what do we do about this? I want to address one thing real quick because some of you might have heard something there that is not what I meant to say. Some of you might have heard me say, so are you saying that 90% of women are wounded and only 10% of men are wounded? And no, I want to clarify. I'm not saying that. Let me say we all have wounds, right? We all have wounds. And there are a lot of men in that other 90% that are just as wounded as the top 10%. But because they haven't had access to women in the same way, their wounds show up differently. Where the top 10% are dismissive or undervaluing relationship with women, a lot of the wounded men in the lower 90% are resentful or hateful towards women. It's an equal level of wounding, it just shows up differently. So I'm not saying that there's more wounded women than there are wounded men. I'd say there's probably equal amounts. I'm just talking about the way the wounds play out socially. If we were to be really real about how many people are healed, maybe it's 10% on both sides. Maybe there are 10% of women who are truly healed and ready for conscious love, and 10% of men who are truly healed and ready for conscious love. And then you wonder why most men think all women suck and most women think all men suck. Well, on both sides, they're swimming in the 90%. Now, I want to say, avoidance is not a personality type. Like, avoidance is not somebody's character. Avoidance is a relational pattern. And so many men, whether they're in the top 10% or not, are going to have avoidance as kind of a standard way of operating for all the reasons I've talked about today. But something interesting happens when a woman is unwilling to chase. So the typical kind of pattern is a woman has this need to be chosen. She finds a man who seems like the ideal person to be chosen by, and she starts pursuing him. She starts striving and attempting to prove her worthiness to him. The more she does this, the more it increases his avoidance. This is something I want women to understand. Pursuing men increases avoidance. If you think that you can identify a man that you want and pursue him and prove yourself to him to the point where he's going to go, "Oh my God, you're so amazing. I want to be with you." That's not the way it works. So let me put it this way. Many men, maybe 90% of men, are going to have some degree of avoidant tendencies because that's the way that men are conditioned. Now, out of that 90%, maybe half of them are so avoidant that there's no chance of a relationship. These are just deeply wounded, deeply emotionally unavailable people that there's no chance of a relationship. But then there's the other half, so say about 45% of men overall, that maybe are not completely healed. They have some work to do. They have some growing to do. But in the right context, in the right relationship, they would be able to show up and do that work. But when a woman pursues a man, it validates his ego in all the wrong ways. Because going back to something I said earlier, the ultimate alpha male archetype, the ultimate thing that all men want to imagine they are, is the man who has his pick of women. I don't think women understand how important feminine attention is to men. It literally shapes his sense of value of himself. And when that attention is given within the right context, it can be deeply healing for him. For him to feel seen, loved, and appreciated by a woman, it can be deeply healing. It can be beautiful. But when it is given in the wrong context, it becomes validation for his ego in all the wrong ways. And the problematic pattern that so many women are stuck in is they give their attention to the wrong men for the wrong reasons and validate their ego in the wrong ways. And they don't give their attention to the right men for the right reasons. And so they don't call forth the kind of man who could really hold them and really nurture their hearts. So something happens when a woman is unwilling to pursue a man that flips this whole dynamic on its head. So let's say, speaking to the ladies here, a woman, you meet a man, and maybe you go on a few dates. And maybe you're showing genuine interest and he's showing genuine interest. And this is activating some pattern of avoidance in him. Now, this is where the woman would often do one of two things. She would either lean in harder and start chasing him because the avoidance that's activated in him is activating her need to be chosen. Or she's going to say, screw him, he's an asshole, I'm not dealing with this shit, and she withdraws entirely. You could look at it like she's thrown from one extreme or the other. The correct move here is to subtly withdraw her energy without disconnecting entirely. It's to let him feel her absence. So let's talk about what avoidance is for a moment, because the way it's talked about on social media or the way it gets thrown around in the culture, like avoidance is often talked about like it's evil. Oh, he's just some avoidant asshole. Avoidance is not evil. Avoidance is fear of intimacy. And remember something I said earlier. I said that a man is often conditioned to believe that intimacy is an attack on his masculinity. That to give a woman power over him in that way is an attack on his masculinity. And so when a woman gets 3, 4, 5 dates in with a man and suddenly starts to experience some avoidance, either her nervous system is triggered to chase him, or her nervous system is triggered into resistance, into her own avoidance. Screw this, I'm not dealing with it. But in many cases, the guy's not being an asshole. He's not doing what a lot of women assume he's doing. Maybe in some instances he's getting a little egoic. He's getting a little bit of a big head. But the solution for a big head is to bring him back down to earth. And maybe it's not even that he's getting egoic or he's getting a big head. Maybe he's getting overwhelmed. You see, this is what a lot of women don't recognize is happening for a lot of men in this situation. His avoidance is not because he thinks he's too good for you, or he thinks he's better, or because he's playing games. It's because he's getting vulnerable. It's because he's starting to attach in a way that makes him uncomfortable. It's because he feels that his masculinity is being threatened on some level. And the solution here is definitely not to chase him, because that's when the intensity and the discomfort of his experience gets so heightened that he needs to withdraw entirely. The solution is to let it breathe. The solution is to let him feel the space and let him think that he might lose you. Now, this requires her to be healed. And it's really interesting. This is why it's like relationships are a two-sided street, because when she steps into her healing, she invites a space for him to step into his healing. And when she runs wild with her wounding, he runs wild with his wounding. Now, a lot of women who are listening to this might say, okay, but why do I have to be the first to step into my healing? Why can't he do it first? Well, I want to say that often he will, and at times he will. But don't let that distract you, because there's a really important dynamic that I want to name here, and I don't want you to get caught up in that, because to the ladies, I want to really show you the power that you have in this situation. Now, maybe I'll do a different episode where I talk to the men and tell them about their power. But this is the power that a woman has. When you get 4 or 5 dates in with a man, maybe less, maybe more, but when you start to connect with a man and you start to feel his avoidance, and you can see that underneath the surface behavior of maybe he's calling or texting less often, maybe he's withdrawing a little bit, maybe he's not showing as much interest to plan the next date. You feel a little distance there. If you can see that, okay, he's not an asshole, he's not a jerk, but he's someone with a scared little boy inside of him, and that scared little boy is having a freak out reaction now. And you can see that and understand that. Now what you can do is start to say, okay, I see that that little boy needs some space, and I'm going to give him some space. Now this requires you, as the woman, to not need to be chosen by him. This is your own work. This is your own healing. Because the more that need to be chosen is driving you, the more the relationship is going to feel like pressure, suffocation, overwhelm to him, and it's going to lead to more disconnection. But you see, these are all energetic dynamics, because when he pushes, when he pulls back and you keep pushing, you're actually pushing him out of your life. But when he pulls back and you register that and you take a step back, not like, oh, what an asshole, I'm cutting him out of my life, but okay, I see what he needs right now. I'm going to let the relationship breathe for a minute. Now you're pulling the energy back towards yourself. Now you are magnetizing him into the relationship. You say, okay, he doesn't want to text as regularly. He doesn't want to plan the next date. What? I'm going to withdraw a little bit myself. Now what's happening on his end is he's going, I was hearing from her, now I'm not. Is she losing interest in me? Am I going to lose her? See, now he's forced to sit with some difficult questions. When you keep moving in and moving in and moving in and moving in, he never has to sit with these questions. But now he has to ask himself, do I want to lose this person or not? Now he's starting to be drawn towards you. I'm not talking about game playing here. And this is the problem, because what I'm really talking about are true dynamics of energetic polarity, the way that we can manage the energy in a relationship, which is masterful. But so many of the people who don't really understand this stuff have turned it into manipulative game playing. So they say, play hard to get. No, I'm not telling you to play hard to get. I'm telling you to read the energy of what's in the room. And if the relationship is calling for space, give it some space. That's not game playing, that's maturity. Create some space that he can step into. Because what happens then, when his avoidance was getting triggered and he felt like he needed to withdraw a little bit because it was feeling suffocating to him, now he feels safe to step back into the relationship. Not only that, he feels the fear of, I might lose her. He sat with that. He's decided, I don't want to lose her. So now not only does he feel safe to step back in, he's stepping back in with the desire to salvage the connection. And you can call him an immature asshole if you want to. But I think a more accurate statement here would not be that he's an immature asshole. I think a more accurate statement would be to recognize that, you know what? Relationships are complex and difficult for everyone. You know, a lot of times when I hear women talking about what an immature asshole this avoidant man is and how he's just not ready for love and all of this, what's underneath that is I'm feeling uncomfortable with giving the relationship some distance, some space to breathe. And I want him to step in and take responsibility for making me feel secure so I don't ever have to deal with making myself feel secure. And I get that, and I'm not criticizing that. That's valid, that's real, but that is a wound. And what's lacking in that perspective is the awareness of the other side that he's having the equal and opposite wound on his end. And so these are two wounded people who both want the other person to take responsibility for their wounds. And what I'm saying is, take responsibility for your own wounds. So notice your need to be chosen. and check that. Notice the lack of compassion for what might be happening on the opposite side of the spectrum. Wanting to judge and criticize him because relationship with him has forced you to face some discomfort. And what that is you're so wrapped up in your own experience of the situation that you can't extend some compassion for the opposite experience. And so let's go back to the original topic that we started with. Healing the subconscious attraction to avoidant men. And I want to acknowledge here, ladies, I know I'm giving a lot of information about your side of the coin. And some of you might want me to talk more about what he should do or how he should be different. But here's the thing. The topic that I'm addressing is healing your subconscious attraction to avoidant men. And everything I've been saying is leading up to this point. This is how you do it. When you experience avoidance, you choose to take responsibility for your experience rather than wanting him to take responsibility for your experience. So some of you might say, I want him to communicate differently about his need for space rather than just withdrawing. Or it's not fair that he's withdrawing. I want him to keep showing up consistently. And I get that. And that's valid. I'm not saying that's not valid. But what I am going to say is in all of those perspectives, you are asking him to take responsibility for your discomfort. And that doesn't heal you. That just keeps externalizing your power. It keeps outsourcing the relational power that you have. But when you experience avoidance from a man, and you say, I'm not going to chase, I'm not going to pursue. If he wants to avoid, if he wants to pull back, I'm going to allow that. I'm going to recognize there's a little boy in there who's maybe uncomfortable with the intensity of the situation, or who's maybe uncomfortable with his own feelings of vulnerability or emotion, or who's maybe uncomfortable with the idea of attaching to someone in the way that I'm ready to attach. And I'm not going to chase him, but I'm also not going to judge him. I'm just going to recognize what's happening here. And I'm going to take a step back to be with myself for a moment. I'm going to sit with how this makes me feel. And I'm going to start to deeply internalize on a somatic level that I do not want a relationship that makes me feel this way. This is the healing that cannot happen when you're on one end of the extreme or the other. It cannot happen if you're chasing him, and it cannot happen if you're judging him. It only happens when you're willing to sit with your own emotion in a place of compassion and understanding for the overarching dynamics overall. And when you do this, you are now drawing your energy back into yourself, the energy that was leaking in resentment and hate, the energy that was leaking in chasing and outsourcing your wholeness. Now you're drawing it back into yourself. You're holding it. And ironically, that draws him into you. Now, at this point, a lot of women are going to say, so are you saying that I should draw my energy back into myself so I can draw in a man who is treating me the way I don't want to be treated anyway? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you draw your energy back into yourself, not for him, for yourself. This is what heals the attraction to avoidant men. Drawing your energy back into yourself. That is deeply healing. Now, here's the thing. Will he be magnetized toward you when you do that? Sometimes he will. If he is truly available for relationship and he was just getting a little stuck or a little confused and that was showing up as avoidance, then he will be drawn back in. But this is the most powerful part. When he is drawn back in, you are now approaching the situation from a place of choosing rather than a place of being driven by unconscious need. Does that make sense? Once you've pulled your energy back into yourself, once you have gotten an energetic hold on the situation, you are now choosing rather than being driven by a place of unconscious need. And now here's what's going to happen. He's going to show up more ready than ever. Because the space that you've created by allowing the relationship to breathe has given him enough safety to step back in. And he's stepping back in having considered that I don't want to lose this person. And now that you're no longer driven by this unconscious need, you're seeing the whole situation completely differently. And now when he's stepping back in, you are in the position of power. Now he is showing up prepared to earn the relationship with you, which is actually what the masculine is supposed to do. The masculine is the protector and the provider. So his role in the early stages is to protect you by giving you a safe context to explore the relationship and to provide for you by initiation, by authentic pursuit, by planning things, by taking you out. You see, when we operate from wounds, what actually happens is the polarity gets reversed. And so the woman starts showing up as the protector and provider, and the man starts being the receptive one. Because the wounded feminine tends to be more anxious and therefore tends to drive herself more strongly into the relationship, she naturally assumes the masculine role. What I'm giving you here is a way to reverse the polarity back to its rightful order, where you as the woman are showing up as the receptive agent and he is stepping in to earn the relationship with you. This doesn't mean that you don't invest. It doesn't mean that you don't make yourself available. It doesn't mean that you play hard to get and hold the upper hand over him and try to make him jump through hoops. It means that now you're at a place of choice. And you are choosing what you offer to him based on the level at which he's stepping into the relationship. And a lot of women don't like it when I address this topic because basically I'm challenging you to take accountability for the relationship. And a lot of women are in a certain conversation where they want the man to be accountable for the relationship. But I want to be really clear about this. I'm not saying that you should have all the responsibility and he should have none. I'm saying that this is how you claim your power in relationship with men. And when women do, when they practice what I'm talking about here, something that often happens is she does magnetize him back into the relationship. But now she's seeing it from a completely different perspective and she says, you know what, I'm just not interested. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the lesson, but I'm not into it anymore. And sometimes he shows up and says, look, I know I just needed some space, and I'm sorry, maybe I should have communicated better about that. I was feeling a little overwhelmed and I didn't really know what to do, but I really do want to explore this with you. And from a safe and regulated place within herself, she sees that and she says, you know what? Okay, I'm open. Let's give this another chance. But whatever she does it from choice, because she has claimed her power and she has reversed the polarity where now he is stepping into the relationship rather than calling her out of herself to try to earn the relationship with him. That's the opportunity that's here. So I want to thank you for being with me in today's conversation. We've touched on a lot today. I know I've offered some challenges here that may have challenged the way you think or feel about things. And so if you stayed with me this long, I want to say thank you for sitting with me through the challenge. I hope this opened up something for you. I hope this gave you a path forward that is clear and powerful. And I've said it many times, but I want to say it one more time. My aim here is not to blame you or to put the pressure on you to own all of it in a relationship. What I'm offering you here is the opportunity to really own all of your power in your relationships with men. And so whatever happens, you're doing it from a place of clear choice rather than unconscious need. So thank you for being with me today. As always, many blessings, lots of love, and I'll see you back here next week. Take care. Bye. Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @TheLivingRelationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.